Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to another special Between Takes episode of Missing Frames. I'm your host, Shawn Eastridge. Normally on Missing Frames, we watch all the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives, but lately we've just been doing these Between Takes episodes because they're just too much damn fun, and we do interviews with filmmakers, we do franchise watches, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. But before we get into the episode, let me just plug the Nerd Party real quick. In case you didn't already know, the Nerd Party is a network of podcasts dedicated to bringing you all things entertainment. So make sure to check it out at thenerdparty.com. Make sure you're following us at Join Nerd Party on Twitter, at the Nerd Party on Instagram. You can like the Facebook page. It's just the Nerd Party. But as I said, Between Takes has kind of become the haven for what one Aaron Prescott has dubbed the Franchyze Boyz. And the Franchyze Boyz are back to discuss one of the great franchises, the great bird of franchises. Is that the appropriate? The great bird of the galaxy of franchises? Is that appropriate?
Yeah,
I'd say so.
It
is.
is.
Why not? So Franchyze Boyz are back, and we're going to be discussing the entire Star Trek film franchise. Now, this is such an epic undertaking. We have had to split it into 3 separate episodes. This first episode will focus exclusively on the original crew, that's Star Trek's 1 through 6. And let me just introduce, before I ramble on too much, our wonderful guest host. We've got Brad Gullickson coming back. Welcome back, Brad.
What does God need with a podcast?
Great question. I'm sure we will discover the answer as we plow through. And also, I've already mentioned him by name, but one Mr. Aaron Prescott. Welcome back, Aaron.
Live long and podcast?
I was going to go with not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain.
Oh, man.
Why didn't you? Should we just start this whole thing over and
just edit
make
this
room
whole,
for make room for the genitals? That's what Star Trek's all about. So I think we should start. And Brad, because you're the one with all those genitals.
You said the magic word genitals, so
you said the magic word, so I'm homing in on you. Brad, tell the good people at home and share with us, your captive audience, how exactly did you discover Star Trek? Like, what was the big introduction for you?
Well, the big introduction was Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. I went with my family to see it in the theater. And I think, like the rest of America at that time, we fell in love with The Voyage Home. And through The Voyage Home, I went back. I think we went to like a video library at the time and tracked down Star Trek 2 and 3. I'm pretty sure we tried watching Star Trek 1, but my child brain couldn't handle it, and I went right to Naptown. Yeah, I fell asleep.
Yep.
And then Star Trek 5, I never saw in the theater, but then Star Trek 6, I have a vivid memory of watching that movie and being deeply disturbed by Chancellor Gorkon's assassination. And around that time, I had started watching The Next Generation. So like the combination of Star Trek's 4 and 6 and TNG really turned me into a big time Trekkie. And I am a Trekkie, not a Trekker. I know people like to think of themselves as Trekkers, and I think that's cool, and you can think of yourself any way you want, but I like to embrace Trekkie as my label.
Yeah, why did that become a problem? Because I like Trekkie. I like both of them, but Trekkie, I never understood why there was an issue with, like, no, it has to be Trekker.
Originally, people would use Trekkie as a derogatory term and mock Star Trek fans using Trekkie. And a way for the fandom to retaliate was to say, no, we're not Trekkies, we're Trekkers. And if you talk to older generation Star Trek fans, they proudly proclaim themselves as Trekkers, and that's cool. Scott Mance, I'm not going to get on your back about that. But I have always thought of the term Trekkie. Well, that's not I wouldn't say actually always, since Denise Crosby's documentary Trekkie came out, and that really celebrated the fandom around Star Trek, I embraced the term Trekkie. And I think, where we sit now as a culture, the geeks have won. And I think we can proudly say that we are Trekkies.
Gotcha. I'm all up for it. I've never understood it. Thank you for finally explaining. Aaron, how about you? When did you first discover Star Trek?
I feel like my growing up there was a discernible line between you had to pick one, or at least how I saw it, and it was the Star Wars fans and the Star Trek fans. It felt like you could not be both, and so I chose Star Wars as my bread and butter and my comfort blanket. And so I finally, started getting into the Next Generation. And so I think I started Star Trek on the small screen and worked my way up. I do remember that Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, was the one I probably saw the most. I'm not really sure why, but it was the one that I just vividly have a lot more nostalgia for than some of the other ones, and so I was kind of like a latecomer to this Star Trek fandom, and this rewatch has been a big kind of eye opener for me, and so I'm excited to kind of get back in there and talk about it.
As am I, and I was introduced to Star Trek. Honestly, for the longest time, I was only aware of The Next Generation. That was what was on television and was the most mainstream Star Trek for me and my family. It was on all the time. I remember my parents liked it. My mom, who is not as I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but my mom is just not as much of a geek as I am. But she loves Star Trek, so it was something that was constantly playing in the house and something that we all sat down and watched together that I really enjoyed. And I didn't learn about Kirk and Spock and the original crew until I played the I think it was the Star Trek Nintendo video game, the 25th anniversary video
man.
game. And it was something like my cousins had it. And I remember like, oh, a Star Trek game. Who are these people? This isn't Captain Picard. Where's Data? And my dad was like, oh yeah, it's Spock and Kirk. You've never heard of them? And I was like, well, no, Dad. That's your fault. How dare you? You are failing me as a father. And so that was my introduction, is that video game. And I loved that game so much that I told my dad, I was like, I've got to see this original Star Trek that apparently exists and was out before The Next Generation. So my dad, again, as we've established, the amazing scholar and teacher that he was, we just went to the video store and he was like, I'll just grab this one. And he grabbed Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, which was my first introduction to the original crew. The middle of the franchise, a direct sequel to a predecessor that requires knowledge of that predecessor to understand what the hell is going on. But I didn't care. I remember enjoying it at the time, but being very disappointed that the theme song in the Nintendo game, which, it was replicating the series' theme song, I was very upset that wasn't in the film. Even though James Horner music is wonderful, I was distraught that I did not get the Star Trek theme. But that was my introduction. Like Aaron, I very young, I was more of a Star Wars guy and was way more into those adventures. It was just kind of my style, and Star Trek was a little more talky. But as I've gotten older and I've watched the films and loved them, but also really gotten into the television series in particular, I think Next Generation really just kind of has blown me away as I've gone through it. We can be fans of Star Trek and Star Wars. We can be fans of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I hold them both in high regard. And I think Trek in particular, I've grown to respect a whole lot more as I've gotten older.
I am proof that you can love Star Wars and Star Trek at the same time, just like you can love the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and DC and Marvel. It was possible. You didn't have to pick sides. But that being said, of course, I think given all our ages, Star Wars came to our lives first. And that was like the true love. And it was through the many iterations of Star Trek as I got older where my love for Star Trek actually truly grew. And I think that's the great thing about Star Trek, is that there is a Trek for everybody. There is the original series, there are the movies, there is Next Generation, there's Deep Space Nine, there's Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery. And I think that's the exciting thing about the franchises, finding all these various entryways for different fans.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, I mean, we're going to be looking at this one specific entryway, and really the films. For the longest time, I'm more of a film guy than a TV guy. I'm just really bad with television. I can't stick with TV shows. I get bored by them. The longer they go on, the less interested I get. And I've always appreciated, like, oh, film, you tell your story and then you're out of there. And I think because I tend to gravitate more towards film than television, it was the same thing with Star Trek. I loved the films, but never really delved into the TV series until more recently. So for the longest time, my most of my knowledge of Star Trek came from the movies, and particularly, again, like the original crew. It was a long time before I started watching the original crew on TV and all those episodes, but I'd
Same.
seen the movies many times before that, and just had a really solid understanding of, like, oh, here's who the crew is, here's what their dynamic is.
But I think that makes a lot of sense. When we talk about the Star Wars versus Star Trek sort of dialogue, because yeah, they're both science fiction. Yeah, they both got the name Star in it, and it's supposed to be relatively similar, and they always get lumped up against each other. But there's a big difference between the kind of swashbuckling adventure of Star Wars and the kind of deep, kind of analytical and social and political discussions that are going on in a Star Trek, and so that's probably why I gravitated towards Star Wars a little more often, because it catches your eye in a much different way, and so that's where I always went to. But in my greater years, I guess I just look back at young Brad and look at how mature he was at such a young age, and I'm just envious of that, and
Yeah.
I guess I applaud him on that. I don't know.
Like, the reality is, like, if you look at the movies are maybe not as action packed as Star Wars, but they are pretty much still action films.
Yeah.
Except maybe motion picture. And the original series, when I finally discovered that, you really see how that is just a cowboy show in space. And yes, there would be episodes where they would have conversations with Lincoln, or they would, address Nazi Germany, and they would try to have these larger conversations. But that original series was still pretty much just like a phaser show.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's probably a lot to do with it. Is Star Wars was like, it was painting in these broad epic strokes that were like the hero's journey, good
Yeah.
versus evil. But in general, I think that's maybe why we were all kind of gravitating towards Star Wars, just the big epicness of it all. But as you get older and you grow a little bit more patient, it's kind of like, all right, I've seen Star Wars, I've seen it tons and tons of times. I think what I've appreciated about Star Trek is the idea of, and again, this kind of doesn't apply to the films, because film is just a different beast from television, and you need to have the big action and excitement. But Star Trek always, I think, as I've watched it and learned to appreciate it and love it even more, I think the idea of solving problems with conversation and understanding versus big battles and explosions, which I believe describes many of these films. But I think that's what makes Star Trek so special, is the idea that you can learn to understand somebody and, like, appreciate the differences between you and them without having to resort to, like, all right, I gotta blow them up.
But also, if you look at these 6 films in particular, they are really about a friendship.
Yeah.
The Kirk, Spock, McCoy friendship with a little Scotty thrown in. And I think that is really what I gravitate towards now, that I'm older. Like, that love that these men have for each other is really felt. And it is something that was there in the show, certainly, but solidified in the films.
I agree. I think that's why, in certain ways, the film's thematic strength, as far as the relationship and the brotherly love between these guys, in some ways is stronger, because, like you said, Brad, I've been going through the original series, and the thing that strikes me is there's a lot of conversation about, like, oh yes, the holy trinity of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, but it's really not that prevalent. Like you kind of see it iconically, like, oh, the visual of like the opening titles are William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley, but you really don't get a sense of that until the films. Honestly, I feel like that
And really
dynamic is
not
really
till
exploited.
2. And I think that's
Yeah.
producer Harv Bennett going like, it's these guys. Let's focus on
Yes.
these guys.
Yes. Well, let's dive into the franchise. And again, everybody listening, we are doing just the original crew, but there are 2 other parts available. We're going to be looking at Next Generation and the Kelvin timeline in those other episodes. But I don't want to disappoint anybody. We'll just kick things off with the motion picture, and I'll just start. Motion picture. I remember seeing this as a kid, and I think it was. I don't remember exactly what I know. Star Trek 3 was the first one I saw, and Star Trek the Motion Picture was the one that was available at the library. Now I completely understand why it was so readily available, why I could check it out almost every weekend and could watch it. But as a kid, it's funny. Star Trek the Motion Picture is the one rightfully so that has been called rightfully slow, because it is rightfully slow. It has been dubbed the motionless picture and all kinds of wonderful names that describe how boring it is. But it's funny, as a kid, none of that bothered me. I really, really enjoyed the motion picture, and I think it prepped me to enjoy films like, ironically, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or even Ridley Scott's Alien, which is a little bit more slower paced and methodical. Star Trek the Motion Picture is clearly desperate to be 2001, but it's an interesting contrast to Star Wars. Of course, without Star Wars, this movie would not have existed. I think, as far as I understand, this movie was kind of rushed into production by Paramount when they realized, like, oh, we own the rights to Star Trek and we need a big sci-fi franchise. So instead of doing a new series, let's make it into a big movie. And I think that shows in the film itself. Returning to the motion picture now, especially the theatrical version, that was the version I watched, and I have fonder memories of the director's edition, which I think is definitely the stronger of the 2 cuts. But I don't outright dislike Star Trek the Motion Picture. There's a whole episode of Missing Frames where I watch it with Leah Hale and TC Paget, and I discuss it in detail. But I admire a lot about Star Trek the Motion Picture. I think it is a stunning looking film. It's grand in a way that none of these 6 movies are, because it had the budget to be grand. It has a very unique look. I think the look is both a pro and a con. The look of the film dates the film as far as the production design goes. Like, it looks like a Star Trek film made in the 70s more than any of these other Star Trek films look of their era. Even the one that takes place in 1986. But while I don't think it's fully successful, I don't dislike Star Trek the Motion Picture. But Aaron, what are your thoughts on this first Star Trek film?
You said you outright don't dislike it. I outright like it very much. There's something about this movie that I'm trying to rack my brain as to what age I saw this movie, but I remember it being slow, and I do remember that it probably did, when I was younger, kind of put me to sleep. But it was like one of those like peaceful sleeps. It was like it just kind of rocked you. You just kind of were watching these beautiful images kind of float across the screen, and it was very there was an air of mystery to it. But it's funny because I was hoping for this series of movies to watch this with my kids. Now, I've watched the all 3 Kelvin movies with all of my kids, and so this one I was like, do I think the big kids? And I was mostly worried about the first one, and just grabbing their attention with it. And so one day I kind of had to like blitz through these and kind of watch them at my own pace. But when I first started rewatching them, my middle son Riley, he was home from school sick, And I said, "Do you want to watch a movie?" And so I gave him some options, and one of the options was, "Well, I'm going to watch this for a podcast I'm doing. I got Star Trek, the first one, which he was interested in." I also gave him a fistful of dollars, and
Yeah.
so and so,
Which is
so
a whole other
started,
franchise we have to discuss.
right. And so we started Star Trek, and we got about 50 minutes, about maybe an hour into it, and he kind of looks, and you can kind of tell like it was starting to wear on him a little bit. But he was like, "Do you think we could start the other one?" And I was like, "Do you like it?" He's like, "I like it. It's kind of slow." He goes, "It's really cool how they're not doing it with computers and all that stuff." Because I kind of give him background on information, being a visual effects major, and having to talk about film all the time. I kind of give him a little bit of history on it, and so he was liking it, but it was a little too slow for his liking. And we started a fistful of dollars, and of course he loved it. But that's another story. But I remember just kind of like liking it when I was younger, and getting more and more appreciation for it as I got older, and just really the artistry and the beauty behind it. I really love the inclusion of our like 60s and 70s fascination with the space program, because I feel like it took me forever to fully like kind of put together, and they solidified it even a little bit more with Wrath of Khan, that this is our specific like naval future, and I never really fully got a grasp of that. So I think planting it in our solar system, and having Viger come out as the quote unquote bad guy, I just really I love what it's doing with that. And Douglas Trumbull special effects are just amazing to look at. To be fair, they the camera loves it as well, and it stays on it a little too much at times, and it just kind of like you just feel like the camera's like drooling all over the effects work.
I
But
do think the director's edition helps the pacing a lot, from what I recall. There are a couple shots in the theatrical that go on for so long where I'm like, okay, this is too much.
Yeah, I mean the story is very slight, and so there's not much to. I mean, an introduction to especially those characters. Like I said, my kids have seen the new age, Spock and Kirk and the whole crew, but getting an introduction that way, maybe it's not the best, but we tried, and it's not like he's completely written it off or anything. So he's ready to go back into him, but I kind of had to go on without him for the podcast.
So Brad, where do you sit on the motion picture?
This movie is great, and it's one of the best in the franchise. I was not a fan as a kid. I did find it slow, and I can understand why people would find it slow, because it's slow. And that's cool. That's A-okay. I think Aaron pointing to Douglas Trumbull's visual effects, obviously astounding. The guy made 2001 in a lot of ways, and he wanted to give that sense of import and theatricality to the motion picture. This is the Enterprise coming onto the big screen for the first time. We are going to really drool over this. We are going to savor this moment. This is a big moment. And I think if you bring your fandom to this film, none of that is bad. None of that is boring. That giant, long shot with Jerry Goldsmith's fabulous score of the Enterprise is a highlight of the film for me. And it's also sold by William Shatner, also drooling over seeing that ship. And what I get out of my many watches of the motion picture is how it really highlights Kirk as a bastard, and his deep desire to get out from the desk and back in the chair, and how he sees this opportunity with this space probe as going like, look, I got the experience, let me handle this, let's not let the kids handle this. And he just throws Decker aside, and clearly Decker knows that ship way better than he does. This ship is far more advanced than the one that he was flying around with back in the original series. And, that lack of knowledge causes some serious harm later on in the film. And him, like, forcing the ship to launch too early kills a couple people. Like, Kirk is responsible for the death of that first science officer and whoever else was joining with him. And then he
Right.
joined with him physically. And that
Yeah,
scene is horrifying.
It is. There's a lot of the motion picture is a dark movie. I understand why it was so off-putting for so many people, because the original series, it's campy, it's fun, it takes itself seriously. Like, it's not like it's just constant joking, but like there's a heart to it that isn't necessarily in the motion picture. And I understand why an audience clamoring for a Star Trek movie, especially in the wake of Star Wars, it makes sense that this movie kind of fell flat on its face the way it did. But it also makes sense why people have come to appreciate it more, because I think for me what stands out about it is that unique feel, that kind of, like you said, Kirk's kind of a bastard. There's kind of a sense of these people are there's a sense of just like not outright despair, but there's a darkness to this film and almost a grittiness, as weird as that sounds, that isn't really recovered. Like, it kind of becomes more swashbuckling in the later films to kind of keep up with the pace of what we want from a summer blockbuster. But there's something about motion picture and it's methodical. I will say, like, my buddy Richie Pepio, who's been on Missing Frames, he and I, whenever we would have sleepovers and it was just like 5 a.m. was approaching and we were like, we have to go to sleep, we would pop on Star Trek the motion picture, and the moment without fail that we would always fall asleep to was the ship, the first tour of the Enterprise. It was like we were just out. But there's something oddly hypnotizing about that scene, about the spacewalk scene, even the weird, we're in a warp tunnel trap and there's an asteroid that's going to kill us and everyone is talking in slow motion. There are things in this movie you never ever see hints of again in this franchise, and I feel like that's what makes it hard to dismiss the movie outright, and that's what really makes it fascinating to me, even though I think what it's missing is the heart. I think it's got good ideas, but really it's a compromised script. It's a compromised film production that holds it back, and it just was never going to be as great as it could have been.
I think it's for me not necessarily missing the heart, but I feel like there's this feels like the film of the Star Trek franchise that feels the most faithfully adapted in its approach to the philosophy that it's trying to bring, and this sort of like cosmic spirituality, and like just the way it kind of like leans into the otherworldliness of like kind of being as close as it can. I mean, maybe this is blasphemous, kind of Kubrickian in a way, and because you talked about how it emulated 2001 in a way, and it didn't really resemble Star Wars. Like, again, we lump these together, but there wasn't a lot of that was resembling to this thing, and that's kind of why I think that this one has kind of like that special sauce, that special Star Trek sauce that Star Wars could never have. That it was, exploring questions and, exploring this, our own fascination. I mean, it's literally about our own satellite coming back. We sent it out there to learn everything, and it found that the one thing it needed to learn was about its maker. And I just find that utterly fascinating, and you don't get that a lot in these big budget movies. And
it is a very Trek thing. Like, I think to your point, even like if the spirit or like the heart, and I think a lot of that comes from Spock. I think because of Spock's journey in this film, I think a lot of people, the irony is Spock is relatively emotionless, but I think in this, because of Kolinar and him being very, very emotionless and purging himself of that. That I think reflects a lot on the audience. Like, oh, well, where's the fun of like the banter with Spock and stuff? But to your point, Aaron, I do think motion picture kind of does feel like a grand episode of Star Trek. Like it does, it is a reflection of what Star Trek is. The idea of like a machine questioning itself and what created me and what's my purpose, and the crew of the Enterprise having to explore that and contend with it, and then also kind of find a compromise with it. Instead of just destroying it, they seek to understand it, and eventually one of the crew members merges with it and becomes a super robot god,
a new entity.
It's that level of kookiness that I think is evident in Star Trek the TV series.
Yes, but I feel like you see the evolution of Gene Roddenberry and what happened between the show going off the air and Star Trek the Motion Picture coming back. Because the motion picture does not feel like the original series. It shares some of that stuff like you're talking about. Like it is one of those episodes that is talking about the nature of man and what is God and what is creation and what is it to create. There were those episodes of the original series, but by this point, Roddenberry really wanted to show a utopia. And I think if you look at this film and you look at the first couple of seasons of The Next Generation, you really see this grandiose idea that Roddenberry had for where humanity needed to go. But in this film, you still have this tremendous tension within the crew, which is then lacking and removed in The Next Generation's first couple of seasons.
Yeah. And I do love that Decker and Ilea are Riker, and like you can see the evidence of what Next Generation would become in that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, Encountered at Farpoint, like, and the motion picture are very, very similar things.
Yes.
But then to Aaron's point, I think Robert Wise was infatuated with Kubrick's 2001, and he is going for a Kubrickian thing. And so it's a collision of those two forces. And this film also, thanks to its budget, but also thanks to its filmmaker, is the best visually directed movie. Now, you can make comments about the editing and the pacing, but just from a straight visual standpoint, and yes, the production design is dated, but the bridge has never been shot better than the motion picture.
And like, no offense to the other directors of the franchise, but like Robert Wise is like, he's a legend. And I think, again, with all due respect to some amazing filmmakers who've made better films in this franchise,
William Shatner,
I don't think anyone has
Star Trek V. He did such a good
of course, but I don't think anyone has the pedigree of a Robert Wise, and never again do we get that same pedigree.
Well, and Brad's one of the head runners of the One Perfect Shot Twitter feeds, and if you were to give me my favorite shots of Star Trek, 90% of them are coming from the motion picture.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. And even watching it this time for like the 900th time, I found like 6 or 7 more. I'm like, oh, really got to highlight those.
All right. Well, guys, is there anything else we want to say about we got 5? See, this is why we split it up, because we get too excited and then Brad loves, we're just, so what do we think? Are we good? Are we anything else that needs to be said about motion picture?
We're recording on the release date of this film in 1979.
Are you serious?
We are.
December 7th?
Yeah.
I don't think that's a mistake. I think I will not weep for V'ger as I weep for my own brother. And that's a line that I love that is not in the theatrical version, by the way. I was horribly, horribly depressed to find out. But
here's not a question, but did you guys happen to watch that edit that I put on our little
no, I completely
thread?
forgot. What is this?
So I implore everybody to go to Vimeo, and I think if you just put in Star Trek Legacy, and it's literally like a fan edit. Somebody cut, I mean, essentially what the storyline is, which you could probably get into 22 minutes of the motion picture, and they put the Daft Punk Tron Legacy soundtrack over it. It looks and sounds exquisite. Like I still love the soundtrack of the motion picture, but it looks real cool, and that's kind of what we've always wanted Star Trek to be, that it rarely reaches its coolness. That was another thing about Star Wars versus Star Trek. Star Wars was the cool kids and Star Trek was the nerds. Now, we can cohabitate and get together, but that's what this is. So I definitely recommend going to Vimeo, put in Star Trek Legacy, and enjoy 22 minutes of the motion picture.
I do need that in my life. All right. So final ratings. I guess V'gers. We'll just do V'gers. How many V'gers, Brad, would you give Star Trek the Motion Picture on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest?
4 V'gers.
Aaron, how about you?
It gets 3.5 V'gers.
I think theatrical cut gets 2.5. Director's edition gets 3 for me. And I need to rewatch the director's edition. It's been too long. But shall we move on to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan?
Make it so.
We're making it.
Wrong franchise.
Save that for the next generation episode, Aaron.
It's all canon.
You're right.
Doesn't matter.
You're right. It's all canon. You're right. Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, the dramatic course correct after motion picture was kind of. I mean, it was not an outright failure, but for sure it underperformed critically. Audiences weren't in love with it, and it didn't do great box office.
It did good box office. It did good.
Well, it did decent, but like, I mean, I think they were expecting maybe
people
foolishly
Star Wars. It was the last Jedi of its day.
People did not like it, and it did not make the money they wanted, especially with the budget that they devoted to it. So they forced Roddenberry out. They were like, okay, you're now the creative consultant, whatever the nice little title they made for him to give him a paycheck. They said, you're executive consultant, but you have zero control over this film franchise anymore. And they brought in Harve Bennett, who specialized in television. I'm not exactly sure what television, but I know that they were like, Harve Bennett, he can make another Star Trek movie. He can make it cheap and deliver it on budget and on schedule. And Harve Bennett knew nothing about Star Trek. And he was like, all right, well, I guess I should probably get around to watching this thing. He watched all the episodes. As we already discussed, he was the one who kind of was like, he homed in on the idea of, okay, it's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And everything kind of revolves around that trinity. And then he really homed in on the episode Space Seed, which featured Ricardo Montalban as Khan, and loved the idea of, well, what happened to Khan? We should revisit that. And it was just like that simple. He was like, well, I guess I'm going to do that. So an outsider comes into Star Trek, recognizes some very kind of base elements and a potential revenge plot. And then they bring in Nicholas Meyer, who, like Harve Bennett, didn't know what Star Trek was. Apparently a producer friend of his who was working at Paramount said, if you want to be a director, you should direct. And I think you might be good for Star Trek 2 that they're making at Paramount. And Meyer's response was, that's the one with the pointy eared guy, right? And so we have a bunch of guys who weren't beloved fans. They weren't like devotees. They weren't like trying to turn this into some sacred thing that could not be touched. These were guys who kind of understood good storytelling, understood how to do it cheaply, but also effectively. And then they come in and they kind of completely revolutionize what Star Trek is and what it could be. But before I give my 2 cents, I want to hear Aaron's 2 cents on Wrath of Khan. Where do you sit with it, Aaron?
It's strange that I feel like I sit weirdly at the same place as the motion picture, but in a completely different way. I really like The Wrath of Khan. I feel like that's kind of blasphemous because every time people talk about Star Trek, it's always about The Wrath of Khan, and it will always be about The Wrath of Khan. And I really enjoyed this. It's weird because as much as I will comment about the slowness of the motion picture, there was still that sort of magic that it had, like I said, that Star Wars could never be. And the Wrath of Khan feels like Star Wars, the Star Trek picture. And for better for worse, that brings in more attention to it. It brings an excitement to it, an adventure level that we haven't really seen before. And of course that gets more eyes on it, which gives us more Star Trek. So how can I be that mad at it? And I'm not mad at it. It's just that it's a completely different flavor that I really enjoy. I don't necessarily love as much. I don't think it's as, it flows as well as some people. I think a lot of people look at the Star Trek series and they see how the Wrath of Khan sticks out from other movies, and they're like, of course it's the greatest, so 5 stars. I'm a realist, and so I look at these things with a certain critique.
What a prick.
That too. That's another thing that I do. But I really like this, and like I said with the last one, I really enjoyed how this one really kind of for at least for me, solidifies the nautical theme to it. We can get to more about like the kind of climactic nebulous cloud battle that is essentially submarine warfare. But there's like, captain's whistles and stuff like that I never really thought about it. I remember I went to a some sort of like pop-up Star Trek museum that was in San Diego at Balboa Park one time, and they had like a sort of a timeline of naval vessels, and it started with like these old maritime ships, moving on to like the big cruisers, and then slowly building into rockets, and then the Enterprise. And I was like, okay, now I see the progression. It kind of fully came into like, okay, I understand where this future is kind of saying, how we get to that point. And I think Wrath of Khan kind of laid the groundwork for that. At least for me, it did. But I had a lot of fun with this one.
Aaron, you lost me at Star Trek 2 is not the best Star Trek movie. But Brad, I want to hear from you.
No,
Brad,
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Okay, all right.
I said it's not a perfect one. I think that Star Trekians, when they say it's the best one, they automatically say, Wrath of Khan, 5 stars. This is a perfect picture. And I'm here to say it's not perfect. It's great, but it's not perfect.
Brad, what do you think?
I mean, it's perfect.
See, there we go.
But when people say that, what Aaron gets right is that they are confused because they forget that every other Star Trek film but Star Trek 2 is trying to be Star Trek 2. And in a lot of ways, Star Trek 2 ruined the franchise.
That is exactly what I'm trying to get to. 100%.
But that being said, I think that it is a masterpiece. It's one of my all-time favorite films. The reason it has all that Navy stuff in it is because Nicholas Meyer wanted to make a Horatio Hornblower film, not a submarine warfare film, but a Horatio Hornblower movie. And he succeeds in doing that. But all like, the plot is not the interesting thing to me. It's the character work. I do dig this reverse revenge story that Ricardo Montalban is living, but I love the terrified over the hill storyline that Kirk is living. And watching the motion picture and Wrath of Khan back to back, what I got a real kick of is at the beginning of the film, when he tells, after the Kobayashi Maru scene, which is a great scene, obviously, after that scene, he tells his crew, like, galloping around the cosmos is a game for the young. And they're like, what does he mean by that? And I just imagine, how would Decker respond to that? You just kicked my ass off the Enterprise and forced me to become a space god, and now you're telling me you don't want the chair, and you think you're now too old for the chair? I found that to be really, really enjoyable. But the best stuff about Wrath of Khan are those sequences between Kirk and McCoy in his bedroom, and McCoy's like, why are we treating your birthday like a funeral? And he gives him the glasses. And then, the death of Spock, like, if you don't cry during the death of Spock, you're probably not sentient, and you're probably part of V'ger, and we got to watch out for you. And, the bagpipes. And at the end, when he's like, how do you feel? Like, I feel young. The gift that he suddenly is given because he realizes the importance of life now that he's lost his best friend, and he recognizes the sacrifice that his friend did. And now he has to live up to that sacrifice. He really has to reclaim his humanity or his sentience, not to be racist, his sentience, as a Terran. Yeah, I think it's really awesome. I think it's a really glorious movie. And then like the James Horner score, yeah, so what? He's like redoing his Krull score
Battle
over
Beyond the
again,
Stars.
but it's still good. Oh yeah, Battle Beyond the Stars. It's all those early James Horner scores.
It
You
really
watch like
is.
Sorceress. It's the same score.
I'm with Brett, and again, not to I'm teasing Aaron, and I know you enjoy this movie, but I really think the reason I agree, I think Star Trek 2 kind of broke Star Trek, but in a great way. It really
Mhm.
just broke the film franchise because almost every film has tried to
Yeah,
be
there's
this
exceptions.
thoughtful.
There's exceptions.
Yeah, there are for sure exceptions, but I think there's a reason why Star Trek Into Darkness was just like, oh, let's just do that again. What else can we do? Um, Wrath of Khan, I think the reason it is a great film, and I'm spoiling my ranking, but why I think it is the best Star Trek film is because it starts from the ground up of what is the story we're trying to tell. What Brad mentioned, the idea of a man who has avoided confronting mortality his whole life, has avoided responsibility as far as like, oh, he has a son out and like that he doesn't know. He's cheated to avoid death, quote unquote, and has always managed to do it throughout his entire career. But what happens when you have to face your mortality? What happens when it comes knocking on your door in one of the worst possible ways, when you have to lose a loved one in order to gain your life or to save the day? And I think that's a really profoundly moving story. It's why I point to Star Trek 2 as such a great film. Beyond I think for sure it has shortcomings. I think I mean, the budget is significantly lower than Star Trek the Motion Picture, so there is a kind of, I don't want to say cheapness to it, but it feels a little bit more like you can kind of see the seams a little bit more, even though I think the battles are super exciting and some of
And
the
I would say like those seams and the budgetary cut, I see a lot of that as positive. And like
yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say like those are negatives. I wouldn't knock its ranking because it looks a little cheaper. I think
Yeah,
by
well,
going
it for
cheaper, they bring a lot of character to those sets.
that's exactly it. It forces them to think creatively, and that really comes through in the story. And I mean, Ricardo Montalban is just a great villain. Khan is a great villain, and the showdown, I just love the way they outsmart Khan when it seems like he's got their number, and coming up with the code and lowering their shields is such great filmmaking,
Yeah.
so fantastically edited and so well done. It's exciting in a way Star Trek hadn't really been up to that point. And but I think what really, really makes this film special is the death of Spock, is the idea of Kirk having to confront his mortality. And like you said, Brett, just the ending of him saying, I feel young. And the idea of like, this was just a self-contained story in which there was an emotional journey for our character that I really, I as much as I love this franchise, I don't think they ever quite reach that level of fulfillment in terms of like just a contained story that tells a complete like strong thematic arc for its characters. And I think that's why I love it so
What
much.
I enjoy so much about the films is how they allow Kirk to be a deeply flawed human being. And
Mm,
even though he, has moments of epiphany and growth, he is still constantly battling his own meanness, his selfishness. And this is one of those movies where by the end of this, he does get pulled out of that meanness a little bit, but he has to relearn that again in 3 and again in 6.
yeah.
I was about to say, I feel like he deals with it, but he never really like battles with it. It feels like he never really like there's never like an outcome. He's always kind of felt like a selfish sort of character, which isn't like necessarily a bad thing, especially maybe for I guess a captain or an admiral
I
or
mean,
something.
like
I mean, that's kind of how they get to that level.
I think you get a resolution of a sort in 6, and then you do have, again, like another bit of a regression in his character, and then another little bit of growth before he dies in Generations.
Oh, spoilers.
I think part of the problem is also, without like jumping ahead, but I think the issue is if Star Trek II is the last Star Trek film, which it just can't be. I know it can't be and it shouldn't be. But realistically, I'm with Nicholas Meyer where it's like, why the hell did you make the next one just bringing Spock back to life? I think Kirk's journey in this film is a little undercut by the fact that Spock comes back. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if Spock's death had been final and that was the lesson and this was the final Star Trek thing, it would feel a little bit more, maybe not significant, but a little bit more permanent. Like it would have felt a little bit
it's a period on the movie. I don't think that period belongs there. And I think it's
Yeah.
enhanced by the sequels. I think this movie is
Okay.
made better by 3 and 4 and 5.
I'm not good. I
agree
mean,
with that,
I will not argue that they should have stopped here. Like, I don't think that's the case, but I do. There's a part of me that for sure is like, well, there's something frustrating about the like, now let's just reverse it and everything's okay. And
But
it,
it's
like,
not
there's
a
a sense of
reverse. This is how this episode becomes like 9 hours long. And I'll just
there's a
stop.
sense of like, look, as the Nicholas Meyer of this trio, I there's a sense of finality and stakes that you lose when you say we're gonna bring this guy back.
Stakes is
to life
bullshit.
after
Like stakes is garbage. Like I like, character is everything.
All right. Well, speaking of character, what are our favorite character beats in Star Trek II? Are there things and confrontations that stand out to you? I think, again, the emotional beats, the moments between characters, but I love the private scene between Kirk and Spock in Spock's quarters. I really love the scene between Kirk and David near the end where David is finally like, I'm very proud to be your son. Are there any other great highlight moments from Star Trek II? I mean, we haven't even really talked about Khan at all, and Khan is just he's almost too, he can't be contained by a podcast episode.
Well, I mean, like the great character beat for Khan is when his second in command comes up to him. He's like, "Yo, you've won, man. Let's just go. We've got a starship. Let's go rule the universe like we were bred to do. We're eugenic masters. Let's go conquer." And he's like, I really can't get over my own ego. We're gonna have to take down Kirk. And I love watching his second in command on my many repeats. Like the more I watch this film, the more I watch that guy in every corner of the frame and just look at how frustrated he is that his boss isn't just getting out of there and conquering the universe.
Yeah, I love it so much. Aaron, what about you?
I don't know. The David thing didn't really work for me. It I don't know what it was. The father son, ambiguous relationship just didn't strike a chord for me, other than just solidifying that Kirk's kind of an asshole. And
I mean, but that's important.
I guess so. No, I agree. I agree.
And I think, if this movie got another hour, which, man, I'd love to see a 3-hour cut of Wrath of Khan, the David storyline would work much, much better. But
I do think fleshing it out more. Yeah.
And then how the David storyline then goes into 6, I think, is crucial.
I think also we need to bring attention, and this is purely from a technical point of view, is the Genesis rebirth scene and having that first. I believe it's the first fully computer generated scene in a film, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
because they came to ILM and talked to Ed Catmull and said, "You got something for us," and before he went off to, or before Steve Jobs, picked him up and put him over into Pixar, they put this together because they were like, we can do something with computers. So I always looked at that as something really cool with Wrath of Khan.
It's awesome, and it's also funny that the budget was so significantly cut, but it also gets to be like the standout, like the first fully computer generated sequence in a film is pretty amazing.
I'm sure they didn't get paid, but yeah.
Probably not. But all right, how do we feel? Anything else we want to add about Wrath of Khan?
That introduction of Kirk in the Kobayashi Maru when the wall opens and he's washed in light and smoke, so good.
It's great. There's just so much great stuff in this. I mean, the death of Spock scene is just stunning. I love, we have the planet being created intercut with Kirk running to see his friend one more time. It's just like in the music, it's so good. It's a great film.
The death of Paul Winfield. Paul Winfield's in this, and he's so good in it.
Yes. We can't forget Paul Wimp. He is the, I think, the centerpiece of this entire franchise without a doubt.
He's really good.
He's great. But I would say final ratings. How many superior intellects that you are laughing at would you give Wrath of Khan, Brad?
Well, around perdition's flame, I give it 5.
Oh my god.
Aaron, how about you?
It gets a solid 3.5 from me.
Oh my god!
Right.
Just take a
listen,
dump on this franchise.
I just see it as like still like a flawed Trek, a great flawed Trek, but still like something that what it takes away from the motion picture, it adds on to other things. I feel like if there was some sort of hybrid of these two movies, I'd be like, that's my perfect Star Trek movie. But it's not. It really like it in a post Empire Strikes Back world, it said, okay, we're going for the sci-fi adventure instead of the thinking man's, science fiction. And I understand. And I just
there is, like, if you this is not just like a mindless action film.
I didn't say that. No. It's not. It is dealing with the whole some things with Star Trek you kind of have to say how this or why that, and you kind of go Star Trek. That's kind of like your
just like every other movie on the planet. Plot doesn't matter.
Plot doesn't matter.
Plot doesn't matter.
I see what Aaron's saying, though. Hold on, wait a second. I'll step up and defend. I've been giving Aaron a hard time.
And your narrative obsession.
Wait, hold on. So what Aaron's saying is the philosophical musings of Star Trek the motion picture, and that are like evident in some episodes of Star Trek, has definitely been traded for more of a gut punch.
No, it's all philosophy, but it is internal human philosophy. It is
that's what I was going to say.
Okay, good. You say it.
I'm going to say it, Brad. Don't worry. I'll say it. We're on the same page. I think what Wrath of Khan gains over just like general, like, does God exist? What's the creator? Like these kind of like great abstract philosophical questions. I think Wrath of Khan is much more just rooted in humanity, and the idea of aging and mortality is so human and heartfelt in a way that to me is more what Star Trek is about. Like the philosophy is great. And to Aaron's point, I think you put the two together and you get like, that's Star Trek. But I think for me, I personally am like, I lean more towards this. This is like, to what you're saying, Brad, the thing that I completely agree with is it's philosophy of a different kind, and it's a little bit more like going for your jugular than motion picture was. But I give it 5 superior intellects. I think it's a wonderful film. But let's move on to Star Trek 3, the first Star Trek film to be directed by a Star Trek cast member, but not the last. And also the first Star Trek 3.
Let me interrupt real quick because I have a question for Brad, because you just stated that obviously this is the first one directed by a cast member, obviously Leonard Nimoy. And Brad was because from what I remember of The Wrath of Khan is that the initial ending didn't have the mind meld and saying remember, and then when the everybody freaked out, they were like, oh, we have to kind of redo this to give us an out, in which Leonard Nimoy signed on to Wrath of Khan because he was going to get a death scene and it was going to be the end and he didn't want to come back. Was the chance to direct 3 directly related to him coming back? Was that like the...
There are conflicting stories, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Leonard Nimoy has told the story where on the day he was filming his death scene, he and Nicholas Meyer and maybe Harve Bennett conceived the idea of like, remember. And Shatner has told the story. He was watching the film and suddenly, Spock does this remember thing on McCoy. And he's like, well, what the hell's that all about? But Nimoy makes it sound like he had
William Shatner in general. I think with these films, he's like, what the hell is that? Why didn't I direct all of these?
Correct. Well, he had like the Lennon McCartney deal where, you know, like if Spock is going to direct, if Nimoy is going to direct a movie, I get to direct a movie. And he was supposed to direct 4, but because of TJ Hooker, he couldn't direct 4. And so he had to do 5. But I also think that I would not be surprised if there was a test audience response to the ending that they needed to leave a little more open mystery. But
that's what my understanding was, is that they screened it for test audiences without the tease, and the audiences were so devastated that they were like, we can't end the movie like that. And
Nicholas Meyer did not direct the Genesis planet stuff at the end of 2, where you see the torpedo lying very snugly on the forest floor.
Yeah, I believe that was an ILM shot.
I also think I think it's completely possible they lured Nimoy back with like, hey, you could direct the next one. But I think Nimoy has expressed that while they were making Star Trek 2, he kind of felt like, you know, this feels good.
Right.
Like, he's like, I was kind of done with it because it felt like we'd run our course, but now it's feeling revitalized. I'm actually kind of sad that we're killing Spock off. So I think when they presented, like they said, well, could you just do something to maybe leave the door open? He was more cooperative than I think he would have been prior. Like if it was just coming off of Star Trek the Motion Picture, I think he was a little bit more like, oh, okay, I'm into it. And then they sweetened the deal by saying, hey, you want to direct it? And I think Star Trek 3 is interesting. I think so first I'll say I think the motion picture is better than 3. Star Trek 3 is not a film I outright dislike, but it feels, and especially coming on the heels of 2, it's just kind of like, oh, it's the next one. And it feels like an underwhelming epilogue to a great film. And I think it's got all these things working against it. I don't know that Nimoy is so comfortable behind the camera at this point to really give this the feel that it needs. Certain beats in it don't feel as big as they should, like the destruction of the Enterprise. And it just, as much as I enjoyed them hijacking the Enterprise and the idea of the crew working together and getting the Enterprise out of there, that's a lot of fun. But like the Klingon stuff and then just all the stuff on the planet just kind of doesn't work for me. And I find Star Trek 3 to be really dull, but I liked it as a kid, not knowing who anyone was and why Spock wasn't in it until the end. And I love the end. I love Spock coming back and just those interactions. But in general, Star Trek 3 doesn't really work for me aside from a small handful of moments. And we started with Aaron last time, so we'll start with Brad this time. Brad, how do you feel about Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock?
Have you guys ever donated plasma?
Sure. Where are we going with this?
Well,
I'm just a blood guy, man.
All right, so I used to donate plasma all the time, and I was donating plasma. And when you donate plasma, it takes like over an hour, hour plus, and they will give you a tiny little DVD player, and they have a library. And you get to pick any movie you want from their library and watch the film on your chest as they separate your blood and your plasma. And one day I decide I'm going to watch Star Trek 3 this way. And Star Trek 3 opens up.
You didn't even want to donate plasma. You were just like, I want to watch Star Trek 3
yeah.
while I'm donating plasma. So that's why it's happening.
And 3 opens up with recreation of the end of 2, but it's told in like this tiny little box that gets larger and larger, so you get to watch Spock's death all over again, and it's got like this filter on it where it's blue. And so I'm watching Star Trek 3, which is a film that I never really loved because it was not 2, but I'm watching that opening, I'm watching the ending of 2 again on my chest as my body is getting literally colder because of my plasma being removed. And I start to cry. And I don't stop crying until my plasma is done. And I don't get to finish the movie because it doesn't take the whole movie to get my plasma done. But I leave that Nova Blood Center a weepy, shivering mess And ever since I watched Star Trek 3 that way, I cannot watch that film without like just bawling. And I was watching it again, and for me, as this epilogue, to use your word, Sean, to the tragedy of two, and of Kirk and his friends, turning against Starfleet, to at the possibility, at just the chance, the tiniest chance, the tiny ridiculous chance that they can bring Spock back somehow, and also help McCoy because he's going crazy because he's got the Katra rattling around his noggin. I find it really beautiful, and then when it crescendos at the end on Vulcan, and you get Spock saying like "ship out of danger," repeating what he said as he was dying in two. Like, it's so satisfying to me. Like, I agree that it is not as well manicured a movie as the previous one, and the Klingon stuff is certainly the least interesting. It's really two-dimensional. At the same time, I think Christopher Lloyd is a lot of fun as Krug, and I love seeing John Larroquette. Who doesn't love seeing John Larroquette in Klingon makeup? Yeah, like to me, it all works, and I have fully invested in it, and I think it is DeForest Kelly's best performance in the entire franchise.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Aaron, what do you think?
I think I'm with Brad. Not so much on the plasma level sadness and losing consciousness, but I there was something about this movie I kind of enjoyed. It does kind of have like the I don't know. It feels like a step down. Like they, some of the sets, especially when you get to Genesis, feel kind of like it's like just a real, like somebody went and just bought like the cheapest plants they could find to like.
It's got some rad matte
shrubberies
paintings,
they could just. What's that?
Rad matte paintings.
They did have some rad matte paintings. But I like the camaraderie between our holy trinity of the Star Trek crew, and of course they're not together in this, but it's in search of the third piece of this puzzle. I like Sean was saying, I really enjoy the heist of getting the Enterprise out of there. Again, when it comes down to David's death, I was weepier with the death of the Enterprise than I was his own body, so I just didn't care. And
but that's still a powerful moment with Kirk. I think
great performance.
David's death, I'm with you. I'm like, I don't really care, but I think Shatner's reaction to it, his performance there is pretty strong.
Sure. It just didn't resonate with me, and I'm all that matters.
Well, you don't like kids.
That's true. That's true.
You don't know what it's like to be a father, Aaron.
I mean, I liked it to an extent. I feel like I'm trying to find stuff, but I genuinely did enjoy certain aspects of it. I just feel like it was lacking in a way. It's funny. It's funny when we come down to these franchise watches. I always kind of like, I have this kind of inner turmoil of, when I'm immediately thinking of ranking something, I think of my star rating, and I think, am I putting the star rating based on how I felt about the previous two, how I'll feel about the next coming up, or how I like films in general? And so I have this moment of crisis, and I'm just gonna go weep in a corner right now because I don't know about life.
I was gonna say, are you getting your plasma removed right now?
I'm right this moment.
Definitely don't podcast and donate plasma.
Don't do that. I think I agree with Brad. There's almost, this is too much to ask of what this film was capable of doing at the time, but there's a version of this that is more specifically focused on the crew and how they. I would have loved to have seen. I think this is pretty solid first act with the heist, and then a pretty solid. I don't want to say third act because Captain Kirk fighting a Klingon on an exploding planet is just not exciting to me, especially a planet that looks this cheap. But the ending,
You
the
guys
coda
are such budget snobs. Like,
but
where's
I
your
just don't. It's
imagination?
just
Where's your childhood? You know,
there's
don't you go to the
it's
theater?
funny.
Don't you watch Macbeth on a stage and you're like, well, that's not real life.
It's funny.
Yeah, but you can
all
you
the time.
can do more things with nothing. Sometimes the limitations
Well,
it
No,
look,
the
push you
limitations
into
is you,
doing.
look,
dude.
Wrath of
I don't
Khan.
have limitations. No.
Wrath of Khan. Kirk and Khan never come legitimately face to face with each other, and their showdowns are so much more exciting than this stupid fist fight with the Klingon Christopher Lloyd, who
I've
is
had
fun.
enough
But
of you.
yes, there is. You do get that great line. But I think there's a version of this movie. What I'm trying to say is this movie doesn't have a compelling second act. It's basically kind of floundering. And I would have liked to seen the version where like the crew is really unite. Like to Brad's point, there is this touching notion of like the crew is fighting, doing everything in their power to get their friend back and to rescue their friend. I love that. And I wish we'd focused more on that, like just the crew working together. Cause it's Kirk and McCoy and Scotty, but then it's like, it feels like the rest kind of disappear for a little
Well,
bit.
Nichelle
Like the
Nichols
whole
literally
movie,
leaves and does not come back.
yeah, I just wish we
Yeah.
could have spent. Maybe there's a little bit more, like some more character beats, like Spock. I remember when he.
Well,
did
the
this
the
and,
one
like, we were
thing that
friends.
the one thing I will give Leonard is that I don't think he's a great director, but I think he's he's not a selfish director, and I say that willingly, knowing who is directing Star Trek #5. And
There is a sense of yes.
Yeah, and I mean it's a search for Spock, and it could have had more Spock, even if it wasn't him, even if it was some weird kid with growing pains the entire time, moaning and doing who knows what. Yeah, for the who knows how long, unfortunate amount of time. But I liked that it didn't focus on him the whole time, and yes, I would have liked more of the rest of the crew. Maybe coming down and Genesis and everybody play Marco Polo and, find where Spock eventually is. But,
Yeah. They do such a great job of giving like the crew stuff to do in that heist sequence that it's just such a deflation when they are gone the rest of the
I don't know.
movie.
I feel
and
like
then it's just like
I don't care.
I Star Trek 3 to me is just like it's kind of an underwhelming sort of sigh, and the whole point is like, yes, they're gonna find Spock, they're gonna bring him back. So by the end, it's kind of like, all right, well, now let's get on with it.
Oh man, you're driving me crazy. What I wish the film did was sell the loss a little bit more, because to get Spock back, Kirk loses his son and he loses the Enterprise. And I think there could be a little more attention paid to the loss of those two things. And maybe they could have lost even more, rather than like,
there's no sense of sacrifice.
Away.
These are two huge things.
Yeah.
The Enterprise exploding, which is, I love the shot of them watching it. And it does feel like you do get that kind of emotional resonance, but it's kind of like, all right, well, let's move on. And that's a big moment that feels kind of undersold.
Well, I think they sell it. I think that sequence is fantastic. And I love when the Klingons board and they're going through the red hallways and they're like, the computer's the only thing talking. He's like, get out of there. I love all that stuff. And I think that totally works. And them watching the falling star of the Enterprise is so good. And Shatner sells that line of like, what have I done? I just think there could be like another beat or two there after the fight with Krug or whatever the hell his name is, or before the fight with Krug. But at the same time, having now watched these movies a bajillion times, I think I do a lot of that contemplation myself. And as presented, it still emotionally works for me as a fan of these characters.
Anything else we need to add about Search for Spock?
This is the only other thing I'd like to say.
Okay.
Is that
go for it.
By being a direct sequel to 2, and then it creates this idea of like, well, there's a cliffhanger ending where we are all aboard this Klingon bird of prey that we then have to like wrap up in 4. So with 2, 3, and 4, there is a sense of progression in the crew's lives that we never really get in the other franchises. And I wished that the Next Generation would send Riker off to the Titan earlier, or, disperse the crew. in a way that
Mm.
this series does. Like when, we get to 2 and Chekhov is hanging out on the Reliant with Paul Winfield's
Yeah.
character, like there's a real sense of time and distance between all these people, so that when they do come back together, it's heightened even more. And I love that 2, 3, and 4 kind of offer that to the franchise, and I wish that the other movie franchises did that as well.
Hmm.
I hear that. Yeah. Well, all right. Let's do Exploding Enterprises as our final rating. So, Brad, how many Exploding Enterprises would you give Star Trek 3: Search for Spock?
I recognize that it's not as good as the last one, and it is a flawed film, but it gets 5 Exploding Enterprises for me.
Oh, out of 10?
Out of 10?
Out of 5, sir. Out of 5.
Aaron, how about you?
I'm giving this 3 Exploding Enterprises.
And I will give it 2.5 Exploding Enterprises. And that moves us on to Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. I'm partial to this one because it was released the day before I was born, November 26th, 1986. It is as old as I am, celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. And it was celebrating the 20th anniversary of Star Trek at the time. And I have to say, what's funny about this is the one where I feel like people are like, Star Trek 4, is that the one where they have to save the whales? And I'm like, that's the one where they have to save the whales. Like, why are you saying it like that? You should be thrilled about this. But on paper, Star Trek 4 sounds like, it's like a message movie.
Yeah, what's this woke nonsense?
And it's like
Star Trek
environmental nonsense. Yeah, it's just like people always talk about, it's the whale one, and I'm always like, no, it's so good. But as a 20th anniversary celebration, which watching it this time, I was like, well, wait a second, this was like celebrating this was the film celebrating that anniversary. I think it's such a wonderful encapsulation of what Star Trek is. The beautiful thing about it is it doesn't need the big space battles of Star Trek 2 and 3. It doesn't need like the big baddie where you have to have Kirk kick him repeatedly into a volcano or lava. It is just this crew going on a mission to save the Earth and at the same time learning a lesson about why whales are so wonderful. I think Star Trek 4 is so delightful, and I do not sit well with this whole kind of like, it's just the one with the whales. It's goofy. I'm like, no. This is a fun, heartfelt, sweet film that is all the things that make Star Trek wonderful without needing the gigantic stakes or big showdowns and explosions that you would come to expect with this kind of film. And it's proof that even though Star Trek 2 kind of completely obliterated the franchise and made every movie feel like it needed to be that, Star Trek 4 came in and was like, no, you can be this. And it was the most profitable Star Trek film, I think, until J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. But Aaron, how do you feel about Star Trek for the Voyage Home? Am I biased because this film and I were born in this, we're both Sagittarius like, am I biased?
No, I don't think so. I love a good whale tale, and this one's fun. I mean, this is I feel like this one kind of it loosens itself a little bit. I feel like number 3, it's a little kind of uptight, maybe a little bit, and it's a little bit more serious. We're searching for our dead friend, and this one's like saving the whales is a big thing. Like growing up in elementary school, it was Star Trek 4 and it was Raffi. Do you guys remember Raffi singing about saving the whales in the Chesapeake Bay and all that stuff?
Oh yeah,
like that was.
No, I immediately need to go look this up. I'm leaving.
Oh, Raffi was like this legendary kid songs writing folk hero.
Songsmith
Songsmith that wrote about the Chesapeake Bay and whatnot, and he'd tour schools and. Oh, it was great. You always had to get the cassette. Just a real blast. No, but this one's, this is probably the second most watched one when I was a kid, and probably just because of the concept alone. I was like the one with the whales, like it was something that completely hooked you. And yeah, some people probably think it's downright silly, but That's what science fiction is all about. It's all about being a little bit silly. And um, I hate to lump this in with the sadness that is Superman 4, but Superman 4 Quest for Peace was also trying to do this earnest statement piece. It's trying to do nuclear disarmament. It does a piss poor job doing it, but it's trying to do something. And the voyage home is like, let's save this planet. Let's save some whales. And let's travel back to 1986 to do it. And I just say a double dumbass to you two.
I think that's why, though, the 1986 stuff is why it works. It's why it doesn't come across as preachy. It's because there's this sense of they're all fish out of water. It's so zany, and it's so much fun watching them trying to contend with what was a modern day at the time. I think that's why, because the sense of irony and the sense of humor it has about itself, and it's willing to poke fun without flat out insulting what Star Trek is, I think is why it's a smarter film than I think maybe some people give it credit for. But Brad, how do you feel about The Voyage Home?
I agree with everything you just said, that last paragraph. Like
nothing else.
Nothing else. This is the Star Trek film when I was a kid that everyone watched. It wasn't Wrath of Khan. Like back in the day, this is the one that your non-Star Trek friends would love, because it is a comedy, because it is a delight. It does do this thing where it's making fun of not the Star Trek characters, not Kirk and company. It's making fun of us, the audience, the imbeciles who are killing the planet by hunting animals to extinction and using nuclear power. We're the ones being mocked, as we should be. And that's the delight of Star Trek: The Voyage Home.
Yeah, and it also has these really great there's still this running thread of Spock kind of rediscovering who he is and his relationships to everybody. And there's a lot of comedy to be mined from that. But what's wonderful about it is it's character revealing comedy.
Yes.
Like the conversations between Kirk and Spock are just so much fun. And the dynamic between the two of them and the woman whose name escapes me,
Jillian.
If either of you know, what's her name?
The character's name is Jillian. It's the Seventh Heaven mom. I can't,
Yeah,
the Seventh Heaven.
Collins
both Seventh Heaven parents are in this franchise, which is incredible.
Yeah.
But I think there's a sweetness to that romance. It's not overplayed. It's not overdone. It's not like Kirk's gonna come in and charm this woman, which he does, but it's not like, it doesn't feel cliched in the way it could. But I love the dynamic. I love them talking about like, oh, do you want to go out for dinner? And he's like, yes, you love it. Yes.
Italian.
Yes.
Yeah. And when Kirk says, well, you haven't caught us in our best, and Spock goes, most definitely not. That slays. Like, bravo.
It's so good. And the scene on the bus with the punk guy and like Spock knocks him out.
Yeah, which connects us to the MCU. Did you realize that Star Trek 4 and the Star Trek franchise is within the MCU?
And connects us to the Muppets.
And the Muppets.
I did not know this, but I am happy and I need to understand.
The punk rocker in Spider-Man Homecoming, the scene where the guy's like, hey, Spidey, do a flip. Well, not the guy saying that, but the guy standing next to him carrying the boombox is the same actor.
Oh my God.
Theoretically the same character.
I love it. Well, I love everything about like the heart of this, the stakes that are, technically the world, like they're saving the Earth. So the stakes are high, but in general, it's a low stakes film that is fun and funny, genuinely funny. Chekhov asking where the nuclear vessels are.
Yeah, like what is the fist fight of this movie? The fist fight of this movie is this comical escape from the hospital.
Oh my gosh, with the goofiest music. Oh man, it's
the score for this music sounds like Christmas because the movie is Christmas. It's a joy.
It does. It feels like a very special Christmas episode. And I think this one is a ton of fun. And I was gonna ask Brad, what is the Star Trek, I guess, history with time travel? because obviously within the movies, this is the first time
Yeah, they've done
that
time
it's
travel
used.
before this. You know, like the most famous Star Trek time travel story that from the original series is The City on the Edge of Forever,
Uh-huh.
where they have to let Edith Keeler die so that Hitler doesn't take over the world.
Because I guess my only problem with that is that this seems like a very easy, like as long as you have a starship that can do warp
Go around the
whatever.
sun.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's how you do it.
like
It
to
seems
me,
like,
I
oh.
wish like Star Trek would just invent time travel so they can stop making up silly excuses for how to do time travel.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
You would think that would be
just go
possible, but I
get
guess
Doctor
not.
Doom's time platform, get it over with. Let's not worry about it.
I mean, look, I want to give Star Trek V ample time for Brad's sake, but I think Star Trek IV encapsulates so much of the spirit of Star
Yeah.
Trek. It does it in a way that mainstream audiences could enjoy and latch on to, because it's winking, but not in an obnoxious way, not in an insulting way. It is deeply respectful of Roddenberry's creation. It's a celebration of it. And on top of that, it manages to do all these things while enriching character
Yeah.
without needing the high stakes that we were starting to think this franchise was desperately needed in order to succeed. So I think on many, many levels, Star Trek 4, there is an argument that I will not make, but it's certainly, I think, one of the best. But I think there's an argument that Star Trek 4 is perhaps the truest to the spirit of what Trek is, I think.
Well, I think another thing that it has going for it is that the rest of the crew has legitimate things to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes, a lot of the times, it's left to, mostly just Kirk and Spock. But every team kind of has their own thing to do. Scotty gets to go talk to a computer, and
Hello, computer.
hello, computer, and Uhura and Chekhov, get to go steal something off of the Enterprise, the original Enterprise.
And I love McCoy, his reaction to 20th century medicine and saving that poor woman. Dialysis. What is this? The Dark Age? Like, this stuff is it's so good. It's so
he just
good.
like gives her a pill, doesn't he? And then they
and she's cured. It's just
Scotty gives them the formula for translucent aluminum or something.
Transparent aluminum.
Yeah.
Yes. What a wonderful, wonderful, delightful movie.
Here's the thing, though. Like, can you imagine this film if they had cast Eddie Murphy like they originally wanted to?
Wait, who? What?
Eddie
Murphy
role? Was going to be in the Jillian character.
No,
yes.
no.
Oh.
I love Eddie Murphy. He's great, but the reason that that would have killed it. That would have made it like it would have been Superman 3.
That would not have worked at all.
Do you know what movie he went and made instead? The Golden Child.
Golden Child. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
His Indiana Jones film.
I think the film works because it's not like ironic. It's not like snide. And Eddie Murphy, I love him. He's snide, and it takes away if that role is played by somebody who's going to be like cracking jokes.
Well, I think he would have sucked up all the character comedy. Like,
yes.
He would have. All the comedy would have revolved around him, and it would have been a betrayal to what this film ultimately is, which is a celebration of every single crew member.
Just in general, of having a comedian in that role, it would have changed from us laughing with the crew to laughing at the crew. And I think there's a big difference in how much fun we have with this movie, and that, we can take this kind of earnest, them kind of, out of time, out of place, and we can have fun with it without condemning them as being, these out of touch goofballs.
Final ratings. How many the hell your whales would you give Star Trek 4? I give it 4.5. Brad, how many do you give it?
I give it 4.
Aaron?
I give it 3.5.
Gosh, so many 3.5s.
He doesn't even like Star Trek.
I know.
Yeah, do you even like Star Trek? What's going on here?
Well, listen, I'm not gonna fake my love for something that I don't fully feel yet.
I'm not gonna fake my love for something that I don't love. Well, you are in luck, Aaron, because we are moving on to a Star Trek film that nobody can dispute their love for, and that film is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. You know what? let's humor him. Brad, why don't you take the floor here and give us school us in the ways of Star Trek V, please.
I mean, Star Trek V's got problems, okay? Like, I'm not an idiot.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Okay.
Let's just get that out of the way.
Like, okay, all right. And maybe it is the worst of the original series films. I would still take it over a few of the next gen movies, frankly. That's where I come from.
$1,000,000,000%.
Okay.
So, but I have always been the great Star Trek V defender because it has character moments that are exceptional. And I think there are scenes in this movie that are as good as other scenes in the good or great movies. I think that the campfire opener and ender is really solid. I actually think Lawrence Luckenbill as Sybok is really good. I think he does a really good job with the role that he has. I think the sequence that really sells the movie for me is Sybok getting into the heads of McCoy and Spock and trying to get into the head of Shatner and seeing the hurt that is inside those characters and how this pseudo spiritual solution that Sybok offers McCoy and Spock is really enticing. And if that's what's going on in the heads of every character, it makes me a little more comfortable with the brainwashing aspects of the other crew members and the other characters in this film. So that's all the stuff that I like.
Okay.
Yeah. Fan dance. All right. I kind of like that too.
Okay. All right. I will say this. Star Trek V, I owe it a great debt because this is the film that reunited Brad and I. Like, we were reunited because of he organized a Star Trek V screening at the Alamo Draft House in Ashburn.
Shout out to Gabe Ruzin for making that happen.
Yeah, I think that was your big, I remember you were real excited about it because I think it was your big first time as setting up a screening at the Alamo Draft House, and you were understandably nervous because of the film you'd chosen, but it was a very it was a well attended screening, and it was a lot of fun. But I think more importantly, that's what kind of you and I got back in touch with each other after we'd worked together at Barnes and Noble, and then we kind of split off, and that reunited us and got us into podcasting together. That opened the door for that. So at the very least, Star Trek V did.
It's a great unifier.
Exactly. So, there's that. The other great thing that Star Trek V did is, I don't know if you've seen the Captain Kirk is Climbing a Mountain music video, where basically somebody made a song out of William Shatner's interview where he is Captain Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain? And this interview is just him talking about just waxing poetic.
We played that music video before the screening of Star Trek V.
You did. It is a masterpiece. Those two things that I've mentioned, both related to the Alamo Drafthouse screening, are, I think, the things that I most enjoy about Star Trek V. And I'm being mean. Brad's point, I think Brad's right. I think Star Trek V has an earnestness to it, but at the same time, I think the humor falls flat. It's tonally wacky.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. At one point, it's really campy. At one point, it's really serious. And then at other points, it feels really, really cheap. The lighting is weird and off. There's creepy, gross romance suggestions between Scotty and Uhura, which come out of nowhere.
Kind of like it.
It's a bonkers movie, but not necessarily it is insane and hysterically bad at points. But there's stuff in here that is kind of then we just drop into completely serious mode when we're looking at McCoy, who had to pull the plug on his dad only to discover a cure for his ailment not long after. There are things like that just feel where is this movie going tonally? It's just too inconsistent. The special effects are awful. The idea of finding God at the center of the galaxy is a great idea, but then you actually get to it and it's just Zordon, and that's underwhelming. But Aaron, how do you feel about Star Trek 5?
You have to start your movie off on the right foot, and when starting your movie off on the right foot means putting a 58-year-old William Shatner free soloing up El Cap, when it looks like he'd get winded just walking down the street.
He did it before Tom
Um,
Cruise.
he did it before Tom Cruise, and completely legitimate too. And had the same buff bod as Tom Cruise too. I agree. But when you have that, set in front of you, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because as we've talked about, we have a selfish director who likes to put the focus on him and him alone.
Oh boy.
That being said, I do like where this movie is striving for, and I like the incorporation of this space adventure and spirituality, and I feel like I really, really like the ideas of what it's reaching, even if it doesn't fully grasp all of them. But conceptually, I think this movie is really kind of cool. It had a lot of bad things going for it. Like I said, I'm not a fan of the director and his directing talents. It needed a few more strikes on his it really does just feel like a rough draft of something. Unfortunately, at this time we're right in the middle of a WGA strike, so there's no writing stuff going on. And one other thing that I think would have really solidified this as being a really good movie is putting a shift. We've had our focus on Spock, we've had our focus on Kirk. This one really could have benefited as being the Bones movie, of being that he's always been such a pessimistic, sort of like straight to the point, no nonsense sort of thing, and him going up against quote unquote God, it seems really interesting, and I really would have liked to have seen that play out, because it just, he's such a curmudgeon, and him battling space Jesus sounds fantastic.
And him being a doctor, and him being responsible
100%.
for his father's death.
Absolutely. That whole mortality thing, I think, really adds to it. So there's lots of little ideas I really like about this movie. One other thing I will kind of put out there is picking up the DP Andrew Laszlo. There's not all the shots here look great, but there are, I think the opening shot when we're in that kind of desert part of what's the opening?
Nimbus 3.
Nimbus 3. Yeah. There's some really quality looking, shots that they've put together, and there's some other stuff kind of smattered throughout that I think really work. I mean, he did what, First Blood and The Warriors.
I think there's actually a lot of good cinematography in this film. Oh yeah, but
but there's also a lot of like really underlit stuff, like where it looks bad. It looks like why is the scene lit this way?
There are some really awkward shots. I agree. But there are some incredibly beautiful shots. And there's a lot of terrible CGI in this film, or not CGI, special effects in this film. But there's also special effects that I think work. I do think that the Zardon head works for what it is. And I think that the cloud tank that they use for the Great Barrier at one point is really cool.
But you've also got rocket boots, which is better in theory than in practice.
But like, to me, like, that's the big problem with Star Trek 5 is that idea-wise, a lot of it works well for me. The rocket boots work well. I could see a version of that scene that would look great and conceptually work. It's just that this movie is being shot on a shoestring by a guy who doesn't have the talent to work with the budget that he has. And also he has no idea what tone is.
Yes. I think I agree with all of that. And but there's also a weirdness to, I think Shatner's performance in this film is singular in that it's the most, this is going to sound really weird, especially because I'm talking about William Shatner, but it's like the most animated we've ever seen him in one of these films. But it's so odd and all I can think is to like Aaron's point. It's like it's the Shatner show, and he directing himself. I don't know if something short circuited in his brain or if there wasn't a director to rein him in, but there's something about his performance, and he does like. I mean, there's good stuff with him. I need my pain. I need it. And what does God need with a starship? But there's like a weird, like he's overly emotive. He's very energetic and like, what's going on? Like the way he performs the role in this movie is so
It's
odd.
over the top. There's a cartoon quality to it for sure. And I think if you listen to the commentary tracks of Nicholas Meyer's Star Trek films and him discussing how he approaches Shatner's acting, and how you really do have to like guide him through. It's so condescending the way that Nicholas Meyer speaks of him. But then you watch Star Trek 5, you're like, yeah, okay.
Yes, he needs a director to kind of give him a talking to. There's also just a random note. There's a Klingon in this film who is a dead ringer for Jared Leto. And
the bodybuilder Claw.
It's the female. I think the female Klingon looks like Jared Leto. No joke. It could very well be Jared Leto.
Okay.
Also, I do want to go climb a rock shirt for Christmas.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly
I have one
as well. But
I knew you would. I knew it. See, can I say something? Can we truly trust the ratings of a man who has a go climb a rock shirt? I mean, that just screams
about Star Trek.
It screams ringer. All right, he's in it.
Look,
I just don't know if we can trust.
You're not getting.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, I fully admit that. Like, my ratings are emotion based. But I would also say that that's how all ratings are. If you were going to be really honest with ourselves, there's no subject as objectivism is a lie.
Very, very true. But I think the reason I can't like as much as I'm like, oh yeah, I see the potential here. I think to Brad's point, the shoestring budget, the major tonal shifts, and just this sense of cheapness and kind of undermining characters. Spock in particular, like Sybok being his half brother, and just like Leonard Nimoy's in general. I think after maybe he's just like, well, I'm not directing this one, so I'm just kind of gonna phone it in. I just feel like there's a general lack of interest from Nimoy.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Nimoy's really good in this movie, and I think that the Sybok Spock stuff, while not all of it works and certainly could use a script polish, I think there's a lot of quality stuff there that could have been really great.
Yeah. Anything else? Like I don't know.
I just say that this movie, first off, should have been number 6. Like if they were still going to make The Undiscovered Country, I say this comes last because having the campfire scene would have been a great send off for the crew, especially that 3. Getting Shatner out of the director's chair, having another pass at the script, and I think we would have had one of the best Star Treks.
I think that this Star Trek is certainly the most in spirit of the original series, including tonal shifts, and big idea wise. But I do think, I think the scene around the campfire, the ending of it, the last shot of it as the camera pulls away is really beautiful. And then Spock bringing the Vulcan harp to the campfire and doing row, row, row your boat. Like, is it corny? Sure. But it's earnest as hell. And that's what I really respond to.
So final ratings for Star Trek 5. How many three-breasted cat women? How many breasts would you give the Catwoman final? How many three-breasted Catwoman would you give Star Trek 5, Brad?
4.
This one's a math equation.
4. I
4.
love
So
this
is that
movie.
12 breasts? I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Aaron, how about you?
I stick with the feature 3.
I will give it 2. Just the normal amount, or not normal for Star Trek, normal for
sanity.
What is it, Terrans?
Sean's like, this is what a normal human being would rate this film, 2 stars.
All right, and we finally made it to Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. And I Aaron, I think to your point, I think the campfire scene for sure is a really sweet coda that would have been a great ending for the entire franchise. But I'm really, really glad that they decided to give it one more go round. that they decided to give it to Nicholas Meyer, and that, again, this is another anniversary film. So this is the 25th anniversary in the midst of Next Generation being on the air and finally hitting its stride. And Star Trek 6 is just the big final send off for this crew. And I think it's this is the first time I've watched it in a while. And I remember watching it for the first time. It was on, like, I think it was like at the beach or something, and it was just on while we were hanging out in the hotel room, me and my dad and my brother, and we put it on, and I remember being so struck by how exciting the concept of like this kind of conspiracy thriller, which was an angle I hadn't seen in Star Trek before, and Kirk getting framed for the death of a Klingon leader. And I just remember being so struck by that. Like, what a cool concept for a Star Trek film. And getting to revisit it now, older, I still think that's such an awesome angle. And I think there's some really, really cool stuff here. But also it is a nice summation of this crew. It's a really wonderful way to end their career. And also Avengers Endgame totally ripped off the end credits, which I had forgotten about completely, but doesn't surprise me at all, knowing how big of a fan Kevin Feige is. But Aaron, how do you feel about Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country?
I have a lot of fond memories. I think I said earlier, this is the one that I watched a lot as a kid. I'm not sure why. I think maybe because it was kind of like a simplistic sort of like storyline. It was the whodunit in space. You know, you had Star Trek characters, and you have an assassination with these floating blood globulates. Like, you know, I like that. I like the you know, going down to the space plant, or the planet where they
Prison
are
planet.
imprisoned.
Rurapente.
Yeah, the prison planet. What's that?
Rurapente.
Yeah, don't care. And
Bastard.
and I also, you know, one thing that I felt like I wanted from this rewatch was, you know, it felt a little obvious this time around about the Kim Cattrall's character being the you know, the kind of saboteur. Yeah, she was the plant. I really think that having Lieutenant Savick come back, you know, she kind of dipped out in 3. I think having her come back, you know, whatever, you know, actress was going to play her this time, would have benefited to, you know, I still think there's an interesting part to be played there, and it would have, you know, stung a little bit more. But other than that, I just really enjoyed the kind of, you know, cat and mouse game on the Enterprise. That was always fun. But seeing it,
it's very clear like that role. It's very clear that Savick, like, I think it was supposed to be Savick.
Correct.
What was it? Was it that was that in the script, Brad?
It was. It was originally
sure.
No, it was supposed to be Savick, and then Gene Roddenberry objected to it, and
why?
Because he liked that character, I guess.
For her to never come back ever again?
Well, he didn't like the idea of betraying the fandom, because he knew that characters that he believed that fans loved that character and would not put up with that character turning villainous. He's wrong, but Gene Roddenberry's wrong about Star Trek a lot, especially at this point in time.
I was going to say.
It's funny to see that, you know, come about from creators of their own products. You know, we see the same thing with George Lucas. We see the same thing, you know, with lots of people that create these things, and they have these kind of idealized visions of, you know, I'm not sure if it's what they want or what they think the fandom wants, or, you know, if the fandom should even receive what they want. But I think that would make for a better story.
Gene Roddenberry was like, 3-breasted cat lady, yes. Savick, the bad guy, absolutely
no.
Brad, how do you feel about Star Trek?
I really
6?
like Star Trek 6. It's the one that's like the most plot, and I don't engage with it as much as the other 5. But that being said, rewatching it and focusing in on on Kirk's racism and his hatred for the Klingons, I think is really interesting. And I love the scene where Spock springs it on the crew. Like, we're going to be the ambassadors to this situation. We're going to be the olive branch. And like the anger and hurt on Kirk. And as the table leaves and this classified meeting exits, and the two of them are left on opposing sides of that table, and behind Kirk is this stained glass window with the Federation Delta shields or the Starfleet Delta shields behind him, and he's spitting like "Let them die" with the with Starfleet's emblem behind him. Like, that feels so incredibly relatable to today. And that scene where he is talking to his captain's log, and he thinks he's just talking to his log and he's not being recorded by the villainous Valeris. And he says, like, how will history get beyond people like me? How will history go forward without my hatred and anger towards these people? And man, that line just like slapped me across the face. And so I loved watching this film from a 2021 point of view and seeing Kirk grapple with his anger. And I wish the film did a little bit more with that beyond like discovering, when he is finally blamed for doing the actions that were in his heart. Like, when somebody actually achieves the murderous hate that is bubbling within him, suddenly he goes like, oh, well, that's not actually who I am. And that those aren't my ideals. I wish that conversation was a little louder in this film. But as is, it's, it's a solid conspiracy movie.
Yeah, I do like that idea. My only problem with that is it felt suspiciously absent in the last two films. Now, 4, there's not, much Klingon interference, but in 5, he's buddying up and, trying to take down space god.
Well, no, like in 5, there are moments, and there are moments in 4 and 5 where there are like really casual racist opinions about Klingons dropped. Like, the ship smells. The food's giving me a sour gut.
Okay, yeah.
Like there is like hatred, very casual hatred towards Klingons.
Maybe the ship does smell though. Like,
yeah,
maybe
man.
on food isn't good.
No, it's like when people say like beans make me fart. The beans don't make you fart. You're just racist towards Mexican food, dude. That's what's going on in Klingon stuff.
Oh, man.
Well, no, what I was saying earlier about Wrath of Khan, which is like there is an actual character journey for Kirk. It's that he farts at the beginning and he doesn't fart by the end. But Star Trek 6 is the same thing. There is an actual journey for Kirk to go on. And like you said, Brad, it's not as pronounced as maybe it should have been. And it's in the midst of this really fun, like exciting, thrilling kind of murder mystery. And I agree that the punch of like the twist is just not as good as it would have been if it had been Saavik. But I think the idea of Kirk learning a lesson or learning to like grow is really cool, and a really great celebration of Star Trek as somebody who feels one way and then through their experiences and just like opening up to new ideas is able to adapt and become the better version of themselves.
Yeah, and there are these like moments, where the Klingon chancellor's daughter is like mocking, I think it's Chekhov, who says like inalienable human rights. Like, don't you even hear what you're saying? What you're saying is so bigoted. And by the end of the film, when Kirk finally gives that speech, he gives that speech because he's the hero and it's supposed to be this triumphant moment. I just wish like in the last third, there was a little more grappling with that side of the story. But it's there, and I'm impressed that it's there.
I think it's there, and it is good. I think the film is concerned, maybe not more concerned, but for sure, I think there's a sense of like, we've got to go out with a bang. It's got to be exciting. And I think for Meyer, I think the thrill of doing a murder mystery is what dominates a lot of the attention and bandwidth of the film.
Well, and also, I mean, he is clearly doing a Cold War story, right? Like,
yes.
It is the Klingons are the Soviets.
There's again great character stuff. I love the stuff between Spock and I don't remember her
Valeris.
name, not Saavik. Any other big highlights or moments that stood out to you guys in the movie?
Christopher Plummer, we haven't talked about him as Chang.
Yeah, Christopher Plummer's great.
So good.
I found the judicial scenes very relatable because it feels like you shouldn't be able to use those recordings in a. It just seems like the evidence wasn't produced in the proper way, and so uh, pushing them down to the prison planet based on no evidence. It was relatable.
And I love that that's like Worf's grandfather.
Wait, what?
Is that Worf's great? I thought they call
Yeah,
him
they call him
Worf,
Worf.
though?
Yeah, Colonel Worf.
Wait. Time out. Did I miss that? It's not Worf?
It's not actually Worf. It's a relative to Worf.
Well, I don't know this.
Yeah, I think Star Trek 6 is a really, again, 25th anniversary movie, also send off for the original crew. I think it works on both those levels. It brings some new angles to Star Trek that we haven't seen before. It's really cool that Nicholas Meyer got to come back, and I think I'm sorry, Brad, but I think it's a necessary and much appreciated course correction after 5 that kind of puts a nice little bow on the end of this franchise that I don't think would have been there.
I mean, I agree. I like, again, 5 isn't great. I'm just saying I love 5. And I think I think it gets a bad rap. That's all I'm saying.
So I guess how many CGI bloods would you give Star Trek 6 The Undiscovered Country, Aaron?
3.5 droplets.
And Brad?
4.
I'll give it 4. I think right there we go. 3. I would say at least 4 of the 6 films earned 3.5 from Aaron. But Can we rank the original series films? I mean, without just doing a ranking without the others.
Yes.
All right. So mine's very easy. Mine is 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, 5. Aaron, what is yours?
Oh man. 2, 1, 4, 6, 5, 3. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, no, that sounds right. Brad, how about you?
2, 3, 4, 1, 5, 6.
6. Wow, 6 is the least favorite.
It is.
My goodness.
And you still gave it 4 stars?
Correct.
Yeah, this is a roller coaster ride of an episode. My goodness.
Boy.
I can't wait to see
all my ratings are appropriate to their rankings. I love this franchise. I love every single one of the first 6 movies. When we move into the other episodes, you'll hear some lower rankings, okay?
We will see. I mean, this was an amazing conversation. This was certainly a roller coaster of emotions and thrills and chills and shocks. And I hope there were some twists and turns that the audience enjoyed. There were certainly ones that I enjoyed. And I cannot wait to hear what both of you have to think about The Next Generation. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been an absolute pleasure. I think we've boldly gone, and we will continue to boldly go in these next episodes. In the meantime, where can the people find you guys on the internet? Brad, we'll start with you and all the wonderful things you're doing.
You can find me on all social medias at MouthDork. If you want to read an interview that I did with Douglas Trimble, you can find it over at Film School Rejects. You can also find my defense of both Star Trek 5 and Star Trek the Motion Picture over at Film School Rejects.
And Aaron, how about you?
You can find me on the socials, usually Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at A Cool Hand Fluke, where I will write things about all the Star Treks and give them middling reviews, I guess.
And I'm at Shawn Dorman on Twitter. I'm Shawn Dorman05 on Letterboxd. Find me there. And also, Brad, he has a wonderful podcast called the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast that everybody should go check out, that he does with his wife, Lisa. Yeah. And Aaron and Brad, though they're on temporary hiatus, you can go and listen to the Rest in Pictures podcast. There are episodes of plenty.
Yeah, there's 30 episodes over there. Go listen.
And then after you're done with that, come back and listen to the Next Generation episode. Brad and Aaron, thank you again. Always a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you at the movies.